Welcome to Bipolarcast. This is a podcast where we talk about metabolic therapies for bipolar disorder with a focus on the ketogenic diet. And today we're speaking with Mia, who we met after going on Brett Sher's podcast with Chris Palmer. And you were speaking to us in the comments on Twitter, and you were saying you'd had this, you'd also experienced this improvement in bipolar symptoms using ketogenic diet. And we've been amazed at how many people have reached out. I'd say we get like 2 or 3 people every week reaching out on email saying that this has happened to them, and I didn't realize how much this was also the case on Twitter. Could you describe me your background and how you became aware of the ketogenic diet and what led you to find this?
Yeah, so my story, it's very long. I'm glad we have an hour. I've tried over the past few weeks since I knew I was going to do the podcast to try to organize, 45 years of history, and it was very difficult. So I just kind of threw the notes away and said, whatever's going to come out is going to come out. But amongst other diagnoses, bipolar at some point factored in. Can't tell you exactly when my first episode was. I was diagnosed with bipolar 2 very, very late. I'm 45 now, and didn't receive that official diagnosis until my 30s. And quite frankly, it was because I had a little bit of psychology and sociology background. I've always been around psychiatry and psychology since I was a little kid. It was me going to the psychiatrist and telling them, they're basically missing. They're missing a lot because in my case, whenever I could get help, meaning go get out of my house, was the time where I was pulling myself most together. And so they would kind of see this false best representation of myself, even though I was telling them, I don't function. I can stay in my house for weeks, months, and years. So it was so impossible for me to get the help that I needed. This happened for 41 years. I was adopted, and I'm going to circle back around to why that's important a little bit later. But so I was adopted as an infant, but I was adopted into an unstable home. My adoptive mother was not emotionally stable. She wasn't abusive, but she was just completely dysregulated all of the time. She was always on antidepressants. She was a screamer. My adoptive father was a screamer and an alcoholic, unfortunately. And I also had an adoptive older brother, 5 years older than me, not blood related, who seemed to have been exposed to something before he was adopted. He was adopted around 8 months old, and he came into the family rocking. So something was wrong. I think he was just really deprived. I don't think he was held much, and he was really neglected. He developed very severe learning disabilities, behavioral issues. By the time I was 7 and he was 12, he was in and out of hospitals. They put him on Ritalin. And at that young age, I had really only suffered from a little bit of anxiety, probably due from the adoption, but I was becoming very frightened of the whole mental health, field, seeing my brother at a very young age institutionalized, and it broke my little heart. And it was very scary visiting him in those places. That's partly where my whole fascination with psychology and mental health treatment began, because I saw what my poor brother was going through and nothing helped him. While all this was happening, again, I'm in an unstable home. There's screaming every day. There's violence. Now I'm developing symptoms. My anxiety is getting out of control. I'm not wanting to do anything. My nervous system is shutting down. And now I'm starting to kind of exhibit what seems to be learning disabilities. In hindsight, I realize it's really trauma-based learning disabilities. I don't think I was born with it per se. So now here I am. You have the adoptive family going in for counseling. They took me in at 3 years old, and I was playing with the little rock'em sock'em robots at the time, dating myself, and exposed to a psychiatrist. So very young age. Then I see my brother going through things medicine not working, therapy not working, hospitalizations not working. And here's my turn. Started to refuse to go to school. They call it either school phobia or school avoidance. And never felt that I fit in. And the other piece to that was I was a very dark child. I was in a neighborhood, unfortunately, that was just very racist and very judgmental about the way that I looked. And so my nervous system could not handle that. I don't think anybody, even if you come from a stable home, that's very challenging. So that's more strain on my nervous system and more sense of isolating me at a very young age. And so my older brother really was still the focus at that time because he was very violent, and he even lit his pants on fire when they were still on him, and he was more of a threat. So he got most of the attention. I was kind of the good child. I was very, very, very shy. Heading into now the teenage years, I'm pretty much a mess at this point. I missed a lot of school. I only went like 3 or 4 days, 2 or 3, I would say. And although I was passing the tests and everything, I was not functioning. I couldn't really, I didn't feel like I fit in. I had social issues, my self-esteem non-existent. And that led to making, of course, once you're a teenager, if you don't have that background of stability, not only in your nervous system, but just family stability, you end up making a lot of bad decisions. You end up not only rebelling, but just being just completely, just really out of control. And also not having a representation of normalcy, of normal connections within the family. I didn't know how to connect to people properly. I didn't know what a healthy relationship looked like. So I ended up in abusive relationships. I ended up being a young mom. And then somewhere along the line, typically this is what happens, that bipolar hits in the 20s. So up until that point, I had already had debilitating anxiety and depression. I mean, absolutely debilitating. I had catatonic depression, and that's what I was treated for. From about the time I was 12, they first gave me Prozac, and you can't expect a 12-year-old to stay on medication. It just didn't happen. Throughout the later years, kind of in my 20s, I tried all different kinds of cocktails of medication, and the side effects, as we know, are just so terrible. I couldn't get through, because it can take a month or a couple of months for it to get at the right level in your bloodstream. I could never really get through those periods of trial and error were exhausting. Mind you, I had 4 kids by the time I was 24. And honestly, a lot of that has to do with the background of not being able to make good decisions and not having structure and all of that. But so here I am in my 20s, in a toxic abusive relationship, 4 children, debilitating anxiety and depression, looking for answers, trying to find solutions, looking to the professionals and the experts. And time again, nothing really was helping. Nothing was helping. The side effects also, you're putting on weight, you're becoming more unstable. I couldn't do that with the kids, having such responsibility for 4 kids and in a toxic relationship. I did have hospitalizations, a few. The first one, I was 14. And I was away for, I think it was about 7 months in total in hospitals and group homes. And then I self-admitted myself twice in my 20s. And again, no answers, no real solutions. I had always been interested in health, and because of my brother, by the time I was 17, what I really wanted to go to school for was psychology, but I wanted to be able to learn how to treat children, especially in a holistic manner. So I wanted to be some sort of a herbalist or a naturopath or something along those lines under the psychology umbrella, because I saw what my brother went through at a young age. So that's really where all of that kind of started, as far as like a better way. And then of course I experienced my own issues. The 20s were a blur. I don't know when I had my first bipolar episode, but because I'm definitely more on the depressive end. But I remember very clearly in my 30s, looking back at a specific month or so, and through my experience with, psychology, and I'm like, oh my God, that was a full-blown hypomanic episode. I didn't sleep for a week. What was that about? And of course, at the time, I'm just thinking, because I'm historically on the depressive side where I can't leave the house. So me leaving the house and staying out of the house for a whole week, I was like, well, wow, this is progress. But it was very dangerous, because as you guys know, that's when you do a lot of damage. In those hypomanic episodes, you're not in your right mind. Your personality is different. Your judgment is completely different. You're just out of control and impulsive, and you're very dangerous, really, to yourself and others. So I'm almost to the keto part. So I had, and this is really of course, a very short version of things, but I had two very difficult endings of relationships. And the last two really, excuse my French, really put me on my ass. I mean, it took me out for years and years and years. It got to the point where, we became evicted. We got evicted. And at that point, two of my children were on their own, but I still had two teens, and we faced eviction and homelessness. We lived in Airbnbs and rooms and hotels for a time, very traumatic. And by the end of 2017 or 2018, I was at rock bottom. I just said, I cannot live another 40 years like this. This is not sustainable. I am tortured beyond belief. The darkness and it's so dark. Unless you've been there, you really don't understand. You were really in a living hell. You're really in a living hell. And I started to plan. Honestly, I started to shop for my urn. I started to plan how I'm going to convince people to let me go. This is inhumane for anybody to expect me to go on like this. I still get a little upset. I get very upset when I hear people calling those who have unfortunately taken that path and committed suicide, oh, they're so selfish and they're so this and so that. It just drives me nuts. I'm like, you have no idea that there's no escape. And even when we were looking for help and trying on the few occasions that we could muster up the strength to try, we're met with attitudes from psychologists, superiority type of superior inferior kind of dynamics going on, people thinking that it's we're not taking enough responsibility for our behavior and our thoughts and our decision, blaming the person whose life is a mess. There's not a lot of people who really understand and who can offer us effective treatment. So all of this time that I'm going through, this is 41 years now of absolute hell and non-functioning. all of this time there was a whisper, because I was into fitness and health, and there was a whisper, you've never really tried to, you're really addicted to sugar and carbs. You get up in the middle of the night and have chocolate quick. You get up in the middle of the night and have cookies and milk, and I can't stay sleeping unless I wake up and have cookies and milk in the middle of the night. And you live on, Cheetos sometimes, and you have an awful, awful diet. Food was my coping mechanism because medication and therapy didn't help. Food became very much my best friend, very much my medication, my pastime, my entertainment, everything. It became everything. And I was like, I just don't know how I'm ever going to be able to kick this. It's all I have. It's the only crutch I have to get me through this. But I learned, I saw keto on social media, and, I looked into it and I took my time. Once I realized it was a no sugar diet, I figured there's no way that I'm going to be able to do this. Sugar is my best friend, but I took my time. I really took my time researching it. And then I decided, and I'm sorry for being morbid, but this is what it looks like, and people need to know. I said, okay, before I off myself, I have to admit, I'm like, I haven't tried everything that I could possibly try. So I'm just going to try this diet. I'm going to try one more thing. And then if that doesn't work, I'm out of here and nobody's going to stop me. This is inhumane to be alive in this way. So I took my time, and I personally eased myself into the ketogenic diet. What I mean by that is I started to try to, just eliminate the things I had already realized that I had realized way before I heard about keto that pasta put me right in a depression. I could not have pasta. And then I went grain free. And I was like, okay, I do feel a little bit better. My mind's clear. So I did have that awareness of a connection between grains and sugars and carbs and my mental health. So fast forward, I said, okay, I'm going to learn everything about this keto diet. And I dove in. I just became absolutely obsessed with it. And didn't commit to it, though. I initially just said, I'm going to learn everything and I'm going to head in that direction, but I don't know if I could do this. So again, I'm just removing things. I'm not having any potatoes and pasta and rice, and trying to cut down my sugar. And then I got all the way down to dark chocolate and sweet potatoes. That's kind of all I was having. And I'm like, well, pretty much almost there. Might as well jump in. And I wanted to also say I had chronic pain as well. I didn't put that in there. I had terrible chronic pain and no cause of it. I went to rheumatologists, orthopedic. I went to an endocrinologist. Really was very healthy. So I had chronic pain as well. Couple weeks in, I don't even think it was weeks. I think it was a matter of 10 days. The lights went on, I think you said that. You're like, the lights I started to just feel different. I was not in the same hormonal and chemical body anymore, and I could feel it. It was totally uncharted territories. I had never felt anywhere near normal or anywhere near functional my entire life. Couldn't hold jobs, didn't finish school. Like I said, was also diagnosed with agoraphobia because I barely left my house. So like I said, within a very, very short time, I started to lift out of the depression. I started to leave the house. At that time, I started to actually get back in the gym. That was over 4 years ago. And since beginning keto, I've never had a bipolar episode since I started keto, period, hard stop.
Wow.
Okay. This is 41 years of hospitalizations, medications, trauma, homelessness, agoraphobia, learning disabilities, on and on and on. Okay. started keto, have not seen bipolar since.
Wow.
Now, of course, it's not going to make everything okay, because I do have that history of trauma. I do have that history of anxiety and depression and learning disabilities. And that itself was just so traumatizing. And because it happened to me at such a young age, my nervous system developed in a very unsafe environment. So my nervous system did not develop properly. My brain is different. My nervous system is different. I still do suffer from anxiety, but I have made tremendous strides and I've gained so many tools, especially in the past year, on working on that and working through the trauma. But if I had not found keto, if I had not stabilized hormonally and chemically first as best I could through this dietary intervention, there is no amount of therapy, there is no amount of anything that was going to help me. So I am grateful that I was born, kind of grateful that I was born in this time, but then I'm like, well, the diet ruined me. So I think the diet of the time ruined me, but at the same time, I'm just so glad that people like us are coming forward, and people like, Dr. Palmer and Brett and all of these doctors are finally coming forward and speaking up for us, because, there's that other aspect of the stigma and us being completely discounted, people not wanting to listen to us. We're crazy. We're just making bad decisions, and on and on and on. So, yeah, that's where I'm at right now with keto. It's been a complete miracle, nothing short of a miracle. So
It's amazing.
Story.
It's quite a story. I also had the homelessness, dealt with a lot of the same stuff. Are there a lot of things now in your life that you can enjoy that were just not on the table before you had discovered the diet?
Since I have such a long history of trauma and the issues with my nervous system, I'm really just learning what it even feels like to be, I don't know if I want to say happy, but just not being so miserable and in such a dark place. It's like new territory for me. And I've had to, with what I have is complex trauma. That's what I've been working on. I'm learning how to have healthier relationships and put boundaries and make better decisions. So I'm happier just overall, but it's still not very easy for me to feel joy, because I get suspicious of it a little bit sometimes. I also have to be careful with getting this actually happened to me in May. I just had a wonderful experience. I had been in Mexico, and it was just so, long story short, it was just like my soul was just like so happy there with the experience I had. And I came back and I was on a high. I got kind of way high because I had never been that happy before. So I got a little too high, and then I kind of crashed after. So I have to be careful with that, but just getting up and being able to function, let's just start there, is about all the joy I have right now. It's just, I had so little, is what I'm saying, is that just getting up and being able to get out of the house, keep my house clean, keep myself healthy. That is what I'm enjoying right now. And I'm enjoying being able now to take the steps to further my recovery. Without keto, without that healthy baseline of nutritional intervention, I couldn't pursue the other modalities needed to recover from the other stuff, from all of the trauma and the abuse and all of that. So I'm enjoying functioning. That's what I'm enjoying. But I have a way to go.
It's such an important point that bipolar depression is something that people can't really understand unless they've experienced it. It's something like people understand depression as like they relate it to like the worst time in their life or the worst they've ever felt or something. But but what you're describing, and please tell me if I'm describing this right, but is you're describing a physiological state that your body goes into that is, it's in a crisis state where it's not able to generate the normal levels of energy and neurotransmitters and hormones to function like normal people do. And it's hard. There's a difference between feeling really, really bad and even feeling like incredibly depressed and bipolar depression, which is where there's this like physiological crisis in the body. Was that your feeling that this is something of a totally different manner to normal kind of emotional range?
Absolutely. Absolutely. This was not, I couldn't use positive thinking, okay, to get out of this. There was, and God bless people for trying to help, you know, and also went through that era where motivation was everything, you know, the Tony Robbins type of, you know, motivation. And yeah, that's great. But if our metabolic, you know, processes are not functioning the way that they're supposed to, if we're not able to get the energy to our brains as everybody, or the normies do, none of that's going to work. It's only going to go so far. That's why I am familiar with, you know, the book that's coming out, Brain Energy by Dr. Palmer. I'm so excited to read it. I know it's quite the scientific read, but I'm up for it. I will study it like a textbook. And but his whole, you know, hypothesis is just makes total sense. Makes total sense. Our system is just not able to use that glucose and to mitochondria issues that we have. We just don't run on the same, we can't run on the same type of energy that everybody else can. And that's why as soon as those ketones kicked in, it was like the movie Awakening. I tell people, do you know the movie Awakening of Robert De Niro and Robin Williams? You should watch it. You should watch it. I tell people I feel like Robert De Niro, I don't remember the character's name, the way it's like he has this pill or this treatment. I don't remember exactly the details, but there is this, maybe it's a treatment that is not approved, and then Robin Williams is trying to get it approved. But he tries it on the character of Robert De Niro, and he goes from a catatonic, shaking, non-functioning person in a wheelchair to just bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and looking people in the eye and interacting with people and starting to like enjoy life. And I'm like, oh my, and then when he goes off the medication, he's debilitated immediately. That's what it feels like for me with keto. I cannot come off keto when I'm out of keto, and I actually don't need to have very high ketones at all. I could be in a very low nutritional ketosis state and I'm still totally fine. I can have, if I do slip, you know, here and there, if it's a small slip, it's not really going to take me too off track. If I have a bigger slip, what happens is not the day after, but I call it DOMS. You know how like in fitness, it's delayed onset muscle soreness. Well, I have a new acronym, delayed onset mental suffering. So it's not the day after, it's the day after, where I'm just like, the energy, the mood, my thoughts will change. Everything just becomes filtered through a more negative awareness. And there's nothing I can do about it. I have to literally just wait to get back into ketosis to come out of that darkness again.
It's so important what you're describing, because it's like, you know, it's like almost like you're an instrument with the strings broken and you're reading a technique about, you know, how to improve your guitar technique. But if the strings are broken, there's nothing you can do. It's like you're so, and similarly, if your, you know, car just doesn't have energy to function, you can't, there's no amount of, you know, driving technique that's going to fix that. And so it's such a great description that you're giving of that, and so important, I think, for people to understand that, because people really do think bipolar depression is feeling sad and you could psychotherapy, you know, this away. We were speaking to a counselor just last week, Nicole Laurent, and she uses keto with her clients, and she was saying the same thing. It's like, once you fix the brain energy problem, all the counseling and all the psychotherapy becomes 10 times easier. I just wonder how, I mean, I have 2 kids at the moment, and I understand what's involved, but how did you cope with 4 kids and having bipolar depression when you're going like catatonic? to me, that's remarkable that people, manage to. What was it that drove you to get through that period of life, especially with?
I'm going to be, I'm going to be completely honest. My kids had to, unfortunately, learn to take care of themselves often, and sometimes and often take care of me. And so we are all in recovery now from this. They have trauma. I hope that bipolar doesn't creep up. They're all in their 20s, so I get very nervous. I'm like, oh boy, if it's going to show up, it's going to show up now. But we're all in recovery, and that's the piece that there are a lot of pieces to recovery, but that's one of them. The damage. So you can wipe away bipolar, but it's just like when you're an alcoholic, you can become you can recover from alcoholism, but the damage that's behind you, the disaster that is behind you, takes a whole other level of tools now to clean up and recover from. Getting the episodes under control, huge piece. That's really just the beginning. It's really just the beginning. Now, it seems like 50% of people, like bipolar just shows up. They had a normal life before, and then bipolar just shows up out of nowhere. But there's another, half of us, it seems, and I'm just saying that from the stories that I've heard and the people that I've spoken to, it just seems like 50-50. Half, and then the other half kind of have my story, where it's just always been just hell and mental illness and medication and hospitalizations, and then bipolar came. Bipolar's one piece. So back to the kids, like I said, they had to learn how to take care of themselves from a young age, and then take care of me. And now we're all recovering together. If I had not found this way of eating, not only I wouldn't be here, I would not be here, but the odds of my kids then getting symptoms, schizophrenia, bipolar, mental illness would have skyrocketed, and their chances for a healthy, normal life would have been the odds wouldn't have been good. So keto has not only rescued me and given me an opportunity to recover from trauma, but it's helped my kids, because they're seeing me recover and not having to worry about me like they used to. And now they're able to start to figure themselves out.
You went through these 41 horrific years of bipolar 2, depression, the trauma. Now that you've discovered keto and this is a part of your life, were there any other skills or wellness habits that became a part of your program as well as keto?
For sure. I think it's about 1.5 years now that I've been meditating every day. I was one of those people that's, because of my ADD and my anxiety disorder, I was just like, there's no way. But again, there was that whisper. I'm like, no, you're going to have to figure this out. You need to meditate, because it also helps with the brain waves. It's a brain thing, So again, it was focused on helping to heal my nervous system. So it had to be a piece of the puzzle. Keto regulates the hormones and the neurotransmitters and gut bacteria and all of this. But I needed to do everything possible, because I had to undo 41 years of stress and a brain that didn't develop the way that someone who hadn't gone through the things I went through. So meditation is absolutely key. If I don't do it every single day, I never think it's working, by the way. And meditation is nothing like anything I've read about before starting it. It's not about sitting there and not thinking about anything. There's so many different forms of meditation. But when I don't do it is when I notice. It's like I have more static in my body. There's something there's something off. I don't know what it is. But meditating every day, you don't need to meditate for a long time. Sometimes it's just 15 minutes. Sometimes it's 5 minutes, and then it's maybe half an hour before I go to sleep. I also try to do some breath work. That's another form of another tool that I use to regulate my nervous system. Again, coming from a long-standing history of trauma and suffering from complex trauma, my parasympathetic nervous system doesn't really like to kick in. I have to really, really help it. Otherwise, I am in a constant state of anxiety, and I'm being run by the fears that I developed in my childhood. I'm not in my cortex. I'm just constantly in that limbic brain. So that's going to be a long journey to retrain your brain, break the old circuits, and start to develop new ones. And so you got to throw everything in the kitchen sink at it. But I'm still off medication. I haven't had any medication since starting keto, and I've been fine. Meditation, breath work, diet. What else do I do? I found a very supportive community for people who suffer from complex trauma. I took a very intensive course. And again, I was only able to take the course because I didn't have those swinging wild episodes anymore. And I could pretty much stay a reasonable person. And then I am actually taking the course to teach the material now, to become a facilitator and a coach to help people with complex trauma. And eventually, I've already sort of started, but I would love to also be a keto coach, specifically for people who have a similar history as we do. And then incorporate both of those modalities, not only the dietary intervention, but the complex trauma piece that I feel is very important. So.
Oh, we have so many keto coaches and dietitians that watch this, so please, everyone, reach out to Mia. And we have incredible people like Beth Kania, and we have Helen Grossi, who's working on a trial, and so many people that work with Laura Saslow, and so many great dietitians to watch this. So please get in touch with Mia.
I would love to connect with them because, you know, I have not officially started that, but there's such a demand out there. Sometimes I'm just in like a Facebook group for bipolar support, and these people are so desperate. And I just say, I'll do a Zoom call free to talk to you about my story and to maybe answer some questions and point you in the right direction. But I would love to reach out to those who have experience with guiding people through the diet, and yeah, I would love that.
we'll after this we'll do some email introductions, but yeah, it's such a phenomenal story that you're sharing, and it really is all the more powerful that you now want to help other people with this condition, because I'm sure you felt in some ways like having gone through something that terrible, and it's indescribably awful sometimes, bipolar depression, and people can't often understand that to go from that to being functional for the first time is just like all you can think of is like, I need to tell people. It's like you're on the Titanic and you found a life raft. You just want to tell people, oh my goodness.
You want to yell it from the rooftops, you know. And it's funny because it's really my life, recovering from complex trauma and the ketogenic diet. I mean, those are my passions, 100%. And so people around me, I'm sure, get really sick of me talking about it. When you had invited me on the podcast, I had texted a few people. I'm like, I get to talk about keto and complex trauma, and people actually want to listen to me. So yeah, it's hard to keep quiet about it.
Yeah, the narrative can be that this is a lifetime illness, and that you get a diagnosis, you're stuck with it, you're going to be on medication for the rest of your life. This is just how you have to live.
Yep.
Even it can be irresponsible to give people hope, because realistically it's not going to get better. I think it's so important to have people on and to talk about stories where we've actually gotten better. This actually is possible. And like we talk about, if you can find the right combination of maybe a metabolic intervention, meditation. I love meditation too myself. Yeah. Like it can be better.
Absolutely. There are a few other things that I wanted to talk about. Oh, so we're spreading this news, and of course we all come up against the same pushback as far as like the myths, you know, the cholesterol stuff, and it's going to cause heart disease, and it's going to cause ketoacidosis, and all of these myths. And it's frustrating, because when I tell people my story, and I'm telling them because they're in a position where it might be time to consider this type of intervention. You know, they just had knee surgery, they had back surgery, they're pre-diabetic, they're obese, they have brain fog, and on and on and on. And then I share my story and I say, yeah, it's high fat, low carb, moderate protein diet. And then they come back and they say, what about cholesterol? And I'm thinking, but look at you. Your health is just absolutely failing. You're not functioning. Your quality of life is in the can. That's so frustrating. But by the way, if anybody hasn't read this, the great cholesterol myth really, really explains and debunks a lot of the fear, the cholesterol phobia that we've been conditioned, to fear. And it also discusses the origins of the food pyramid and the, lipid hypothesis as far as heart disease, Ansel Keys, that darn study that changed the history.
Yeah.
And it really goes over all of that and is super, super helpful. But it is an uphill battle, but I feel like now we're developing this community, and community is everything. When you're, with the complex trauma, biggest piece for me with complex trauma is being in contact with other people and being connected to the work and connected to a community. And now we're building this community. I'm so happy that you guys are doing what you're doing by not only having the professionals and the experts on, but regular people like myself to share their stories and anecdotal evidence. I think we're at a point, at least now, where the movement has gained enough backing. I know we're still at the beginning, but there's so many people who have just said, so many people who have just wanting to take their health into their own hands because they became very hopeless. So yeah, I'm just happy to be a part of it. And I'm just so glad that you guys are doing what you're doing.
I think your story and you helping people with this now is going to affect so many people's lives. And it's remarkable what you came through with having children and homelessness. And like, it's unimaginable to most people to go through something like that. And it makes, what you're saying all the more powerful. And so I have to say congratulations. It's really a bit rare for people at this stage to have crawled out of this, because we're really, when I meet people that have survived this and come through to a place of recovery through a metabolic approach, I really see them as rare survivors that have just got out of this at a time when, unfortunately with bipolar, the attempted suicide rate is 30 to 50% at the moment. It might be even more. And it frustrates me so much, because I'm like, what other condition do we just allow this to run? Like, it's immoral that we allow this to happen. And so it's patients like yourself and like Matt and like all the people you have on this podcast speaking about it that is going to change this, because people can't ignore it if we keep talking and we keep saying it. And it's also remarkable that people like us are talking about this publicly, because usually we have to keep very quiet about our illness and be super careful. But it's reached that point where we're all just like, we need things to change, and we're willing to speak up and share our story and to move this forward. So it's really powerful what you shared. And I wanted to I asked this to Chris Palmer as well. What would you say to psychiatrists at the moment that see, and many psychiatrists we speak to are experience this, that the medications, they can help to some degree, but in the long term, they still see patient after patient dropping off. What would you say, and to psychiatrists in that situation who really care about their patients, who want to make them better, they really want them to recover, but they just don't see it always happening what would you say to them?
As with anything, when you're really wanting to make a change within yourself or within a certain population, you really have to open your mind, and you have to open your heart, and you have to throw away the medical dogma and holding on to your expensive degrees and putting all of your faith into all of that education, which often is sponsored by certain industries that don't have our best interest at heart. It's not a conspiracy. That's just how it works. But if they really care, they really need to open up their minds and hearts and listen. Listen. We're not all, there are hundreds and thousands of us now coming forward. Are we all making it up? Like, is this like a case of, self-fulfilling prophecy? Just because we think the diet might work, it works? No, not after 41 years of not being able to leave my house and functioning and trying all types of medications and interventions and all of that. No, it's much more than that. So I just really ask them to listen and stop holding on to the past. We appreciate their efforts, but it just has not been good enough. And even Chris Palmer, he goes, it's not necessarily that they don't want to help. It's just, they just didn't know how to help. They thought they did, but it just does not. The medications have their place. I think at one point when I was at one of my lowest points, it helped me to at least not, end my life at that point, but I wasn't functioning. I still was not functioning. I still was not in recovery. I was just a little numbed, and I was happy to just stay in the house. I didn't really have goals anymore. I just ate and took a shower and watched TV, and that's about all I could do. I wasn't, I was surviving, but I was not flourishing. I was still lost. I still didn't have a sense of identity and purpose at that point.
The doctors need to wrap their heads around the idea that this works. I think it can be difficult when you're trained, from medical school, that a drug is what's going to do it. And that the idea that diet can be this powerful isn't necessarily pushed, but it can. It is the most powerful intervention I have ever seen on my own bipolar illness. Time and time again, we hear people come on this podcast trying the cocktail of medications for years, sometimes decades, and nothing works. And then they get on this diet and it's a game changer. Not necessarily going to work for everyone. We understand that.
Yeah.
But we have to draw attention to the fact that it can be such a powerful, life-changing intervention for this illness. Do you have a message, Mia, for the people who are suffering from bipolar right now?
I think the people who are suffering right now with bipolar probably have some of the same experiences that I had of therapists, doctors, psychiatrists, family members, kind of being condescending, right? Kind of making us feel like, we're a burden, and we might be, because if we can't get proper treatment, it's kind of a losing battle. It's daunting for the people around us. But when you've been suffering for decades, you don't believe in yourself anymore. Your self-worth is just non-existent, your self-esteem. But I want to send a message that nobody helped me out of this. I pulled myself out of this with major learning disabilities, with no self-esteem, with no support, no doctor, none of that. It is possible that you have what it takes. I'm not saying ever to just go off your medication, because I have done that in the past and it almost killed me. So don't do that. But it's okay to get in touch with your own body and start to make your own decisions, do your own research, listen to other people who have walked that path, and believe that you have what it takes to take your health in your own hands and change your life. Do not listen to these people who say there's nothing you can do ever. If you ever have a problem and someone says there's nothing you can do, even if they say you have cancer, there's nothing you can do, don't listen to them ever. There's always a piece. The body knows how to heal itself. You have to figure out exactly what it needs. And despite how worthless you feel, how incapable and incompetent and compromised you feel, you can do this. Join this community, find support, find people like myself who have done this diet, and then take steps. You can take things into your own hands. When Chris's book comes out, take that book to the psychiatrist. Try to find somebody else who is somewhat low carb knowledgeable. But definitely don't give up. There is a hope. This is not about you being broken or less than, or that you don't matter. There just hasn't been the support and the knowledge out there that we needed to recover from this. But there's hope now. There's actually hope that just through diet, that, you can pull yourself out. You may have to have, medication, titrate off of it. You may have a little bit of medication needed here and there, but I think that this just, that there's hope, and not to give up, and believe in yourself. You can take things into your own hands, and you have a brain there, and just to do your research, reach out to the community, and just don't give up.
And I just want to add, there's places that you can reach out to if you've experienced what Mia's experienced and you want to try this with the supervision of a psychiatrist in a very safe way. There's people like Georgia Eade who've been doing this for a very long time, decades of treating people with this condition, and they work with dietitians all over the world who can help you to do this. There's people like Beth Kania and people like Shivani Sethi at Stanford that are doing clinical trials you can join. We're doing one here in Edinburgh, and so you can reach out and we can help you to this in a safe way, either through a trial or through these registered dietitians that work with people to achieve this. So there are places even now, and ultimately we want to get to the stage where psychiatrists will, if this is, we want to show that what we're experiencing is something that applies to like the broader population, and psychiatrists will then be able to recommend it to patients based on randomized controlled trials. And at the moment, all psychiatrists will listen to, rightly so, is randomized controlled trials. So that's on us to show the data, like here's the randomized controlled trials, and here's now the ticket to prescribe this to people, and the impetus. And from the patient side, we can help drive that forward by telling these stories and sharing on these individual case studies what has happened. And I think that's so powerful, because if you look at what happened with the Charlie Foundation and epilepsy, it was the story of Charlie Abrahams. And you can look at the research trajectory. There's no studies, there's absolutely nothing until 1996, when there was the TV documentary on his recovery. And then whoosh, the whole field just took off, and thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of people have recovered and benefited from that. So that's what we hope. And your story is a huge part of this, because you've come at this extremely early stage and found this of your own accord. But it's through your own strength of will and character that you found that. But we want to find ways that, we can encourage people that are just can't find that same strength and don't have. You did it without support from family, which is really remarkable. I had huge support from my family, from my father, to help me recover from the depression. So it's all the more amazing that you're able to do that. And thank you for sharing this, because it will inspire many, many people that it is possible. Even if you don't have, a tremendous support behind you, you can get to a place of recovery and stability.
Absolutely. Do I have time to make one more point?
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. The other part I wanted to bring up is the stigma. I know that you've talked about it before. It's come up in other podcast episodes, but one of the challenges I faced as a single mom with bipolar, I could not come clean with how bad I was, because I feared having my kids taken away. I couldn't come forward and say I fantasize about suicide 24/7. And that was my default, by the way. I didn't bring that up. My default was just suicidality for decades. I mean, every single day, every day, it was just fighting those thoughts, thinking about it, contemplating it, and coming back, no, I can't do it, because, I have children and whatnot. But one of the many obstacles for, I think, mothers, especially single mothers, getting help is the way that things are right now, they're going to want to take your kids. And that's another huge block that I faced. And it's that stigma. We have to, not that suicidality is normal, but it's way more prevalent. Like, people just get in these states, you're emotionally out of homeostasis, your body's suffering. It's really just a symptom of some other things that are going on. For us to just lock people up and be like, oh my gosh, like this is terrible, they're having suicidal thoughts. The way that people freak out over it, it stops people from talking about it. And then somebody does do that and they say, oh, but they were so happy yesterday. No, they weren't. They didn't have a place to go and be brutally honest without facing judgment and facing freaking people out. And that's something that I would love to work on, is just being able to speak about these really scary, dark thoughts that happen without everybody freaking out. And the community at large just needs to be, hopefully, just provides more of a safe space for us and just normalizes almost the fact that, especially after COVID, so many people are struggling with mental illness. So we should be able to talk about it without being, dismissed and being blamed for our own misery. So yeah, the stigma is a huge piece. Huge block.
I totally agree. And it's when you're suicidal or having suicidal thoughts, people think, I think part of the stigma might come from, how could you want to do that? Like, don't you think of your family? And but if you took a normal person and lit a raging fire in the house beside them, they would jump out the window, because if there was no other way out, they would have to, because
exactly what it feels like. Mm-hmm.
Yes, and that's exactly how it feels in these very severe bipolar depressions and manias. It's like, it's not like a value judgment where you're like, oh, I'm gonna do this because it makes sense. It's completely illogical. It's just because there's a fire in your house and you're jumping out the balcony because you can't stand the fire. And so I totally agree that speaking about this is so important for people to understand. If it's something you're comfortable talking about, could you try to help someone who's never experienced suicidal thoughts without obviously us going into it, but could you help someone understand this dynamic between how can someone have a family and have things they really care about and have, could you help someone to understand? Because I don't think many people do have any conception of what this is.
Yeah. A lot of, in my case, I had this history where just thousands of traumatic events, and they get stuck in the body. There's a somatic component to trauma where this energy and these memories get really stuck in the body, and that affects your, it's been brought up in some of the episodes, long-standing stress, especially when you're young. If you have this taxed adrenal system, cortisol and the stress hormones are riding high for years and decades, it's really polluting your system. It's taking you out of balance hormonally. There's no amount of circumstances that's going in the exterior that's going to correct that. It's like a nervous system on fire type of deal. So your body feels heavy. You don't have the energy to even get out of bed. Everything seems so overwhelming, even having to brush your teeth and wash your face. Yes, there are kids around, they need you, but you also have a disconnection. You have a disconnection from your cortex. That's your thinking brain when you're in these states. You're in an emotional crisis. You're in your limbic brain. So again, it's like it's a nervous system issue. It's a chemical issue. There's nothing you can positive think your way out of. Just because I had 4 children that needed me, it just did not erase the fact that I knew no normalcy before. I didn't know how to even relate to my children. I didn't have that connection as a young person. So in my case, it's many different factors, but you can't pull yourself out of these dark states. That reminds me. So I met my birth family at 14 years old, and lo and behold, on my mom's side, there's a history of mental illness. So raging bipolar, depression, and anxiety on my birth mom's side of the family. So there you have also, for me, a perfect storm. I had the genetic predisposition. I had the environment. So it was, I had no way that I was not going to really struggle at some point in my life. So there is that genetic component. However, like I said, I also had the environment to switch on those genes. I don't know necessarily if I had the right support and the right environment and the right diet, if I would have ever experienced bipolar, who knows? But just wanted to say I do have that genetic piece as well.
That's something that came up in the last podcast as well. That was this in the maternal line of the family, and we're saying how, you know, this energy dysregulation is like a mitochondrial dysregulation. And we've known this in the research for a long, long time, that there's mitochondrial dysfunction in bipolar, that the cellular engines aren't producing enough energy, and that all your mitochondrial DNA comes from your mother. All your mtDNA comes from the maternal line of the family. Yeah, so you inherit all of your mitochondrial DNA from your mother's side of the family. And it is not necessarily a direct, this is why this is, but it's just interesting that it does travel. It traveled in my mother's family line as well. And there's something going on there that we need to research more and understand more about. But it's a plausible hypothesis that this is mitochondrial dysfunction being inherited. And it wouldn't necessarily express for everyone, because if you have a very like calm environment and you don't have a lot of stress and your diet is very good, you know, maybe these systems wouldn't break down as easily. But if the modern world is not like that for most people, it's incredibly stressful, and the diet is you know, so far away from our physiological best diet, and so it brings it on. So I just wanted to say as well, when you're saying about your kids, like I am convinced that we're going to fix this in the next decade, in the next generation, before our kids will ever have to experience this. And this is what I tell myself every morning when I wake up. I have nightmares about this happening to my kids, but then I don't worry about it in the way that I used to. I can see that the research is starting to happen. We've got even some of the best ketone researchers in the world, like Dominic D'Agostino, getting interested in this. I'm like, oh yes, like we've got the best people starting to come on board with this research. And it's very exciting. Even in Edinburgh, we're seeing people that were normally very skeptical about this, like suddenly becoming really, really interested in it. And so I just feel very hopeful about it. I feel like this is moving in the right direction, and my kid is not going to suffer from this. Even if they do have it, I'm okay with it. Like, we're going to treat them in a way that is way, way better than we've ever done before. So I feel extremely hopeful about the future for it. And yeah, and I just think with people like you telling your story like this, it cannot be ignored. It cannot be ignored for any longer. I'm sure this is going to go far and wide. I'm very excited to see the impact that it makes. I want to be respectful of your time. We've run over a bit. Do you have a couple of minutes?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Are you okay, Matt? Are you okay, Matt, for a couple of minutes? Yeah. And did you have any final questions? Matt, before we are...
Oh, let me think.
Sorry, I just realized I talked for a long time there.
Here's a fun question. What are some of the foods you like to eat?
Good question. Carrie Brown brought this up, how you kind of have to tweak. You have to keep tweaking, because as you're healing, your body could have different needs. I started keto very heavy vegetable. I did a Dr. Berg keto, and he's nutty with the vegetables. He wants you to do 7 to 10 cups of vegetables a day. I tried, but I got very close. But I was having massive plates of sauteed veggies and coconut oil, and some protein, and that's how I started. I would say the first year was like that. But it's evolved. When I had wanted to get back into the gym, I still was kind of in that mindset where you need protein, you need lots and lots and lots of protein. But if I was eating all of these vegetables, I noticed when I increased my protein that my swelling issue, I also have a swelling I'm prone to swelling in my legs. I would retain a lot of water. Wasn't testing my ketones at that time, so I don't know if I was getting kicked out of ketosis, but I knew I wasn't feeling very good when I increased all of this protein. So I thought maybe there was a component there, but I came upon some nurse or some doctor that said, oh, if you just stop eating vegetables, you can have twice the protein. And I was like, So then I actually went to kind of a ketovore where I'm mostly, I have some dairy and more protein and really not many vegetables. And like I said, I've changed it along the way. Right now, I've fallen into this routine where, oh, by the way, I do intermittent fast. I'm an intermittent faster hardcore. I only eat once a day. So I do have a coffee with a little heavy whipping cream. Technically, I guess I'm not fully fasting, but it works for me. So I just have a coffee with heavy whipping cream about an hour and a half after I wake up. I might have a keto soda, just a little something sweet. And then around 5 o'clock, I'll actually have a green drink. There are some really, really high quality, good green powders out there that aren't loaded with anything artificial. And I find that it really helps me with my appetite and any cravings that might come up. So around 5 o'clock, I'll have a green drink. And then when I get home from work, I will have, lately I've been doing eggs and sausage, I have an avocado every day. Eggs, sausage, avocado, and I am a filet mignon-aholic. Not just because I love the way it tastes, but the funny thing is I tried to do a cheaper keto. This is just my experience with chicken and fish. It doesn't cut it for me. I don't know what it is about red meat exactly. I guess it's the fat makeup in it. But when I have red meat and butter at night, man, I am like, my brain functions so much better the next day. If I just have like tuna fish and avocado and I don't really want to eat that much, I notice the next day or two, if I don't have some red meat, specifically fatty red meat, I'm not doing my best. I have lower energy. I'm not finding my words. I'm losing the train of thought again. My cognitive function really gets affected. So I have to do a red meat keto. I really have to do red meat and butter and eggs and avocado and sausage and stuff. And that's pretty much what I do. And for dessert, I have keto chocolate. I have lots of keto chocolate. It doesn't kick me out of ketosis. I can't really do the almond flour desserts. I've noticed that I have some sensitivity to nuts. So I can't do the keto cakes and keto cookies and keto breads. I find that, again, it affects my cognitive function right away. So would love to go straight carnivore, at least maybe for a couple of months out of the year, but I'm just not quite there yet. Again, I'm still studying with complex trauma. It takes a lot out of the system to do this type of recovery work. So I'm doing what I can right now, and that's what works for me: red meat and avocado.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, and butter.
That's awesome. Do you have any questions for us before we round off?
I don't know if I have any questions, but I am excited just to see what comes of the trials. I know that your trial, you said by the end of the year, maybe you'll have some information from that 25-person trial, is it, or a study?
Yeah, we have a pilot happening that will be finished this year, and so 25 patients, and we'll be reporting results as soon as possible. But yes, very soon. And there's several trials happening. There's one in Edinburgh, there's one in Stanford, there's one at James Cook, and then there's other groups like Jeff Follick's group and Dom D'Agostino's group that are doing trials in depression. As well as bipolar. So it's really going to be a lot more data on this very soon, which is going to be great for psychiatrists, great for patients, great for everyone that wants to use this as a therapy, but it's kind of blocked at the moment without having that kind of underlying scientific structure for psychiatrists to look at and prescribe this. So it's very exciting, and it's just awesome that this is being driven by patients asking for it. I love that. Like it's from the earliest stages. This has been driven from people like yourselves telling their story and demanding it from scientists and from researchers, and we're like, let's make this happen. So it's really exciting, and
we need them to speak up for us. We need, people like yourself to speak up for us. They're not going to just listen, to us having those professionals and the experts having our back now and spearheading this is just like, it's a dream come true. I'm just so excited what the next even year is going to bring.
And we need to introduce you to all the dietitians and people. So we'll talk after, but yeah, we'll tag on Twitter as well. And I'm very excited to see how things develop with keto coaching and working with people with these conditions. And thank you for turning your attention to doing that as well, because that's really amazing and can help. I'm sure it will help a lot of people. So thank you.
Yeah, and if we could put, I mean, eventually I would love to have a lot of content regarding the complex trauma and my keto experience. But even at this point, if people want to reach out and ask me any questions, I am so open to being there for the community and connecting with regular folks and professionals that would want to talk to me. So I don't mind if we put my information in the description.
We'll put it in the low bar.
Yeah. Where's the best place to contact you?
I think, honestly, it's just easy on Twitter, I suppose. That's a good starting place. Twitter is fine. I believe it's Ms. Mia Mendez is my handle, MSMIAMENDEZ. We can start there. I'm looking forward to just meeting more people in the community. I really am.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for talking to us today. And
thank you so much for having me here. Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me here. It's been a pleasure.
And hopefully again soon, maybe in a few months, we could come back on an update. That'd be great.
I would love to.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.